The Redistribution Scheme. Hi, I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. When commenting about taxes, my textbook author Gregory Mankiw writes, the benefit actually accrues not to the government, but to those on whom the revenue is spent. So pretty much all of fiscal policy is simply a redistribution scheme. Private ownership of goods and grades. My students don't want their grades redistributed. I've offered many times, but they don't want to give part of their grade to a student who made the choice not to attend class. See, this is a really interesting social science experiment because we're talking about redistributing wealth in a very close-knit environment. They know very well their fellow students who made the choice to skip class, and they want them to be responsible for their own behavior. Now, in class recently, we heard Tim Grosclose on a PragerU video explaining that the Laffer curve tops out at 33%, meaning if a society's taxing level is under 33%, people will continue to offer their value-creating labor in return for pay. But when it's greater than 33%, they begin to do what Ayn Rand calls shrugging in her famous book, Atlas Shrugged. Look, we all shrug at some point. Now, Christina Romer, who is the chief economist for President Barack Obama, claims that as a group, society shrugs when more than 33% of their labor reward is taken from them in income taxes. Her article, stating that number, was published in the American Economic Review. Largesse from the Public Treasury. Alexander Fraser Tytler famously said, quote, "A democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the people discover they can vote themselves largesse out of the public treasury," end quote. There is great danger this is happening now. On national election night, you've probably watched endless analysis of the smart map reporting the smallest details about the voting patterns in each district. When you look at those red and blue sections on the map, you notice pretty quickly that the redistributist-leaning crowds who populate cities vote for policies that increase the size of government, while those not receiving funds from the public trough vote against it. You see, this does not surprise economists because we expect the expression of self-interest. What disappoints us is the lack of individuals' ability to seek a higher standard than simple self-interest. Every day, we choose either to reach for the higher angels of our character or slide to the lower levels. It just makes you wish people would reach higher, doesn't it? A recent column by Wall Street Journal editorial board is titled, "How America Soaks the Affluent." It shows how the top 1% of earners paid over 42% of the country's income taxes. That's up from about 33% just 20 years ago. Now that same 1% earned just over 22% of the nation's adjusted gross income, which means the share of taxes paid by the top 1% as a group is roughly double their share of income. Whatever else you say about the current tax code, there's no denying that it is steeply progressive. Phil Gramm has pointed out that the U.S. has the most progressive taxing system in the world. I've pointed out that the rich pay their fair share in my podcast number 96, titled Tax the Rich. But apparently the Democrats have found that their talking points works, despite its long distance from reality. The bottom half makes about 10% of the total adjusted gross income in the nation and pays just over 2% of all income taxes. 20 years ago, they paid almost 5% of all income taxes. Get the direction? The U.S. taxing system is becoming even more progressive. But don't expect the Dems to abandon their favorite fable about the rich not paying their fair share. That leads a reasonable person to ask, when will the rich shrug? They have options, Now, for interstate movements, you can reference the movements from high-tax states like California and New York to low-tax states like Texas and Florida. From another Wall Street Journal article, it says residents of the 7 highest tax blue states are in financial trouble. California and New York impose income tax rates that can exceed 13%, but their budget deficits are mounting. Yet Florida, Tennessee, and Texas impose no state income tax, and they all have sturdy surpluses in their budgets. Yep, their coffers are so full, they're thinking about cutting taxes. So how is that possible? Guess who wrote the article I just quoted? The aforementioned Arthur Laffer, along with Stephen Moore. When these taxpayers will shrug and leave the United States is a frightening question. Now, in Ayn Rand's book, they used a science fiction time tunnel to escape. Since that does not exist yet, they will simply trundle off to Monaco and the Cayman Islands. Political economics. Andy Kessler, writing this week in the Wall Street Journal, complains about what he calls the rise of kickback capitalism. The subtitle is, "What the government does best is throw your tax money at favored constituents." Yeah, now you understand why I began this podcast with a statement from Gregory Mankiw about taxes not going to the government, but to the people on whom they are spent. In the recent State of the Union address, President Biden claimed, "I'm a capitalist," then fell back on the old bromide about the rich not paying their fair share. Good grief. Real capitalism is, by definition, a meritocracy in which money flows to those providing the highest returns. Collectivism always fails for lack of meritocracy. That's where my sophomores enter the picture. They like a meritocracy. It happens to align with the Christian worldview of private property, which America's rugged individualists have claimed historically. Yes, there is an alignment of Christianity and economics around the idea of freedom. Now, just a few of the kickbacks that Mr. Kessler writes about in his article. Start with up to $20,000 in student loan forgiveness for tens of millions of voters who took on debt to overpay their college. Those who saved and paid retail get nothing. While it's likely to be struck down by the Supreme Court, it's also a kickback to universities that constantly raise prices and hire more administrators. Look, we're all for free speech, but when it's expressed by crony capitalists who feed at the public trough, it can get nauseating. Since COVID hit, the U.S. has deployed $11 trillion in spending, loans, disbursements, and asset purchases. In the finance classes at Dallas Baptist University, we teach the idea that markets allocate capital. Well, they do, but they don't have nearly the return on investment that can be earned by lobbying efforts. Referring to Mr. Kessler again, quote, "It's hard to summarize all the kickbacks in the $1.9 trillion 2021 America Rescue Plan. $350 billion for state and local government and mostly public union employees, up to $91 billion for pension guarantees, another $36 billion to bail out union pension funds, and don't forget $1,400 means-tested stimulus checks for individuals." In a February executive order, Mr. Biden embedded a focus on equity into the fabric of federal policymaking, claiming it will lead to, quote, "better decision-making and more equitable outcomes," end quote. He failed to point out that it would provide more largesse to favored constituents. Equitable outcomes are collectivist, with capital diverted unproductively to buy votes. Without individual empowerment, meritocracy vanishes and capitalism stops working. Jared Bernstein, who heads the President's Council of Economic Advisors, recently admitted the nature of the redistributive state when he said, "Sometimes it's not necessarily all kosher economics. Sometimes it's political economics. Sometimes." Or with this crowd, just about all the time. Pluribus Pluribus. So the politicians have been bought off by multiple labor unions, chief among them the teachers. They're courting every small identity group they can identify based on ethnicity, sexual persuasion, and other demographics. But here's the problem. Breaking the American electorate into smaller interest groups is not biblical. Galatians 3:28 reads, "There is neither Jew nor Gentile, nor slave nor free, nor is there male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus." Now, we used to be e pluribus unum, but the political economics referred to by Mr. Bernstein is changing the formula to e pluribus pluribus. In politics, they say, follow the money. In economics, we say, follow the self-interest. Private property. Now, what I've been talking about has some pretty serious private property and theft implications. When the government is using tax revenue to fight evil, it's generally considered to be the correct Christian view. But when private property is taken simply for redistribution, that violates the 8th commandment against stealing. Federal revenue last year came in at 19.6% of GDP, a level reached only 3 times before. No matter, Mr. Biden always wants more of your money to redistribute to others. That's political economics, or as we call it in the Christian worldview, the fallen nature. I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. Fear God, tell the truth, earn a profit. See you next time.